Sweet. All right. Before we officially start, if you guys can, like, if you're gonna type a question, if you can type it in the chat, and then like towards the end, then I'll open it up for like vocal, like if you want to come off mute and just talk off your mic for to ask questions. Just so I don't get sidetracked, because I know myself, and if you ask me a question, I'll lose my train of thought and you know, go from there. But yeah, any questions you have, just you can type it in the chat and then we'll hold the end for more questions as well, but you can come off mute and talk and stuff. All right, so to officially start, as always, my name is Advent. I am not a financial advisor. Anything in this video or any content that you guys see is not to be taken as financial advice. This is just for educational purposes. Trading does have its risks, so please do your research before you engage in trading. Cool. All right, so let me share my screen. It's going to be more note-taking than charts, but we'll probably jump on charts for a little bit. So risk management, just getting started out. Risk management is essentially, for those who don't know, when you hear the term like risk will be like how much you would be risking for a trade, how much money you may be risking for a trade. So let's say, for example, somebody may have like $1,000 account and they might say, all right, for this trade, I'm going to risk $100 to make $200 or whatever it may be, just to give you guys a quick, you know, term breakdown. So as the class suggests, we're going to be going over risk management, which is managing your risk. As a trader, this is your first priority because you need to protect your capital. You need to protect your account because, as you guys hear me say a lot, losses are normal and losses are part of the trading business. So you can't escape losses. But we have the control of, mitigating or lessening the amount that we lose per trade. That's why you'll hear the terms a lot, as a trader, your first priority is being a risk manager because, the name of the game is staying in the game. And if you're risking your entire account on one or two trades and those trades go south, then you're out of the game. And now you have to put more money in, which I'd imagine people don't want to put more money in. They want to take a lot of money out. So I'm going to break today's class down in like options and then futures, since it's different how I calculate it compared to the futures market. So we'll go over each one. And I kind of just this isn't necessarily like a textbook definition. This is just like what I consider for specific percentages. So let's actually make it make sense. And now let's keep it at 15. So when it comes to trading options, I've kind of divided it in like three different types of traders, in the sense of the percentages that are here, they're percentages of your account that you're putting into every trade. So in the examples here, when we're going over percentages, these are just going to be the percentages based on your based on your account. So if you have $1,000 account, you can look at this as you're using $150 to $200, and I'll add numbers so we can all follow along as well. But essentially, I just categorize it in three different versions or three different categories: the aggressive trader, the moderately aggressive trader, which I fall into this category, and then a conservative trader who may want to risk less per trade on their account. So starting with the aggressive trader, let's just, throwing some numbers out there. So if you have $10,000, this will be your starting capital. The percentages would equate to $15 to $2,000 per trade. Now, of course, when it comes to your stop loss, I'm going to mainly speak on my experience. but you would formulate this plan in line with what your risk tolerance is. So for me personally, my max loss, whoops, is 30% on any trade. So no matter, so if I take a trade here, which would equal to, was that 150? 30% is 450 to 600. So 450, whoops, 450 to 600 bucks. So if I was an aggressive trader, I would use 20% of my account per trade. And then my max loss would be 30% on the trade. If the specific setup is going to give me more than 30% loss, I'm not going to take the trade because that's outside of my risk tolerance. Now, of course, with most of us trading the strat, each trade is not going to be 30%. Most of the time, at least for me, it can be about 15 to 25% on average. 30%, I'll just calculate it on the spot, depending on, what the Greeks are looking at on that specific contract in relation to the stock price. And if it exceeds 30%, then I will leave the trade alone, or you can reduce your position size. So you can take a similar dollar loss, but you may be using a less percentage of your account on that trade. I don't do this often. It's very, very, very rare that I do this, but you can always reduce your position size to still give you a loss of 450 to 600 or whatever the numbers may be, just to give yourself a little more leeway. But again, I do this like probably maybe once or twice a month, if that. It's not my usual trading plan when it comes to trade setups. Making sense so far? Everybody following me before I continue? And you can type yes or say yes on voice. Either one is fine. Cool. Now, depending on, I guess to give you guys like an experience I've had in the last 2 weeks, so I can better understand again, what it's like to trade with small capital. In my Roth, I sold off some investments to come with $500 in cash, and I've been using the aggressive trader model. So every trade I started with 500, and then I would use between 100 to 120 bucks per trade. Generally, I can only get one contract until Friday when I could get two. And that account is almost doubled. It's about like 915, 920-ish, from the $500 that I started off at 2 weeks ago. So for a smaller account like that, I'm going to be a little more aggressive, because if I'm using 7 to 10% on like a $500 account, then I can only get contracts that are like 50 to 60 bucks, which I'm extremely limited to the contracts that I can choose. So for that account that I did for 500 bucks, I'm being a little more aggressive on it. And something to note, while the account is almost doubled, that doesn't happen always. I've just had really, really, really good trades where they went 100% multiple times. So if I were starting a smaller account, I'll probably be a little more aggressive personally until I get to 1,000. So once I get to 1,000 on this account, or at least $1,000 in cash, I'm gonna move down to being a little more like to be moderately aggressive. So I'll put like $100 in the account or per trade, or 120 per trade until I get to like 1,500. And then, my position size will be higher, and I can slowly continue to compound the account and go from there. So just to add some quick math, let's say just for the moderately aggressive trader, in this case, we would be using, what is it? 700, whoops, to 1,000 per trade. And then per trade, and then max loss Same thing, 30% for me. And again, every trade is it's gonna have a different percent loss. That's gonna depend on the chart. You know, let's say looking at NVIDIA here, let's say it triggers a 312 down. If you're using the trigger candle as your stop loss, that might be, I don't know, maybe like 5% loss or 10% loss. It really depends. Or let's say in this case, if you're going to use half of the inside bar as your stop loss, so 50%, which will be 126.77, and then our entry will be what? 125.78, so about $1 away. So let's say if I go to NVIDIA, and then let's say I'm looking at what is that? That's their puts. So let's say I take a 126 put, so and I get in at 300. As we know, with the Delta or the Greeks, if it goes $1 against us, we're going to lose more or less $52 per trade, per contract. So being this at 300 that we got that for, 10% will be $30. So this will be about 15 to like 19% loss if it goes against us, because the loss will be $1 away from our entry if we take that down. So this contract and trade would be within my risk tolerance, because I'm only risking maximum 30% on the trade. But this specific trade here will only be 15 to 19%. Does that make sense before I continue? And how I got those numbers? Cool. All right. Let's go back to our notes. So this will be what? 210 to 300 bucks. And then so on and so forth for the conservative trader. I don't really want to do the math again. But this is the model that I personally use when it comes to trading options. But of course, you can tailor this to whatever fits your personality. You know, if I had like a really big account, like if I'm trading 100K, I'll probably be more on the conservative side, risking, putting in 2 to 5,000 per trade. I wouldn't really be doing like 7 to 10%, at least not yet. When I get there, I'll let you guys know and see where I'm at. But so far for the account size that I trade, moderately is what fits my type better, my risk profile. But again, I've added the three models here, and you can decide, for yourself where you think you may fall into this category. And then, cool. Now, do I want to go to futures next or talk about risk reward? Let's see. Oh, something before that I forgot to mention. So let's say if I put 10% of my account in a trade and it hits my max loss per trade, that would equate to a 3% account loss per trade, meaning I would have to lose about 30 to 40 losing trades in a row before my account is blown, which statistically is impossible when you take high probability trades all the time and you follow your rules. Because remember, you're going to lose, but as long as you're winning more than you're losing, you'll be fine. And of course, that you respect your risk management rules, because you don't want to lose 50 or 70% in a trade, because that'll be 5 or 7% of your account in a single trade. So remember, risk management always comes first. I know for people who trade Forex, at least from what I've seen in that community, I think maximum, like the general consensus is like they would risk 1% maximum per trade. But of course, that's an entirely different market and the calculations are different. So that'll be more tied to when I go over futures, which we'll go over now. So with futures, it's definitely different in the sense of like a percent of the account. Um, since the way I look at futures is more so in relation to the specific setup that I take. So let's say for the sake of the conversation, you have I don't know, let's say a $5,000 account. And let's assume you trade ES. So 1 point equals $50 loss. And then in this case, for ES. So with futures, it's a little different in the sense that it's not like options where it's like I'm going to put 10% of my account in the trade. It's different for futures because you're just using margin for the trade. So then this is using the margin requirements for Tradevate. Different brokers use different margin requirements. Like if we go to try to trade on Thinkorswim, for ES, they require that you have $17,721 for one contract in your account. So you can see how the numbers can be a little different when we try to apply the same concept as we did up here. So in this case, my risk tolerance for futures is mainly dependent on each specific setup and what dollar amount I'm willing to lose on each trade. And then from the specific number, I would apply that to the account value. So let's say for the sake of the conversation, let's say setup A, take profit would be, so hold on, let me make this a little cleaner to follow along. So setup A, take profit level, let's say we will make 300 bucks if it's our take profit for that setup. And let's say our stop loss would lose us, let's say 150 on that trade. So if I'm starting with $5,000 and I only take setup A, then let's do some math. So I can take 33 losing trades in a row before the account blows up. So with futures, it's a little different how I would like calculate the loss that I'll be willing to take on a trade. So for me, $150 loss on a $5,000 account, I would take that gladly. That's fine. And again, depending on your setups, if your setup is high probability, it would never be an issue where you will lose the account because of the specific setup that you're taking. Is that making sense? You guys following me before I continue? Cool. So for those who trade like prop firms, I kind of developed this because while I did start trading future like on a personal account, once I discovered prop firms, I kind of went into that right away and kind of left. Like I still trade my personal account here and there, but I mainly trade on prop firms just because the leverage that they give me is higher. So I kind of developed this based on the prop firms because a lot of them, they have like drawdown rules. So let's say, all right, Mike, you're in here. So Mike, let's say for you with the 25K account on Apex, your take profit goal is 1,500. And then your drawdown or your trailing drawdown, to be very specific, is 1,500 as well. So in this case, if you only take setup A, you only have 10 losing trades before your account blows up. and you lose the account. Then you got to start all over again. So in this case, what I would personally do when I trade on a 25K account, I would bring that down. I would bring it down from 1 ES to, let's say, so this right here, setup A, this will be with ES mini. And then let's say we do ES or MES, so micro ES. Whoops. And then this will be, I think it's like E mini. And then this will be ES. So in this case, what I would do is, let's say for the same setup, I'll use half the size of ES, which would be, so let's go back. So 1 ES contract, and then this would equate to, what's that, 6 points, 6-point gain, and this will be 3-point loss. And then for MES, we're just going to be using 5 contracts. So we'll do 5 MES. So take profit level would be, that'll be in half. So that'll be 150 that you would make, or your stop loss would be $75. So with a smaller account like this, you can see that if we go to half the position size, we go from taking a max loss of 20 trades as a loss to a max loss of, instead of 10 trades before the account was blown, we can half that position size. And now we have 20 trades that we can lose in a row before the account was blown. Making sense? You guys following me? Cool. So in this case,
Mommy.
what was that, Kia? Oh, so so in this case, you can use the micros to size down so you're not taking that big of losses. And if you are a trader that has a higher take profit and stop loss, then let's say like these two examples that I gave, let's say if you want the same amount of take profit and stop loss for the sake of the conversation. So if you want the loss to, let's say, be 300 as well and 150, now you have 12 points or a 6-point loss that you can take because you're using half your size, so you can double your stop loss levels and take profit levels. For me personally, I trade a 100K account. If it's a very, very specific setup, I'll use 3 contracts on YM. And on that specific setup, my stop loss is 15 points. So I'll lose $225 maximum per that trade. Generally, I use 1 or 2 YM depending on the setup. My max loss point-wise usually ranges from 30 points to like 35 points maximum that I'm willing to take on a YM trade. So that'll equate to about 150 to like 5 points? 150 to about 350 loss per trade, depending on the setup that I'm taking. So my risk, as as we've been going over, is calculated. Cool. All of that making sense before I continue? Cool. And again, this, I'm just using ES and MES as an example. Whatever it is that you trade, you would have to sit down and do the calculations yourself for your setup. And then you would go from there to determine, all right, should I be using ES? Should I be using NQ or or not really NQ. Should I be using the mini or should I be using the micro, depending on the setups that I take? Um, which size of account with Apex do you recommend for ES? If I were to use one ES contract, let's bring up Apex. Hold on. So if I were to trade one ES, again, it depends on how aggressive you are. If you're going to be trading one ES, you can do 25 or 50K. You may want to consider the 50K because, it gives you more drawdown. So 2,500 would be, let's see, 10 points. That's 50 points that you'll lose, that you need to lose before the account was blown in a row. So 50 point max loss if you lose all those trades in a row. So I would probably do a 50K account if it were me, and I'll do one ES. But again, that depends on your setups and what setup and what your setup looks like, or what your setups look like. If I were to trade a 25K account, I'll just do 5 MES until I pass. Well, what I did when I first started with prop firms, I had a 25K account. I was trading NQ, but I did 5 MNQ. And then each trade would be 10-point stop loss maximum. So that would be $100 per trade. So I had 15 trades in a row before I lost the account. So what I did was after I passed the account and then I got to the payout threshold, I padded the account. I kept on trading only 5 MNQ until I got to about, I think it was like 28K. So I had that $3,000 or $2,900 buffer between me and the max drawdown. So then once I got to 28K, then I started using one NQ because now I have a bigger buffer between me and the max loss that I can take on that account. It will take you a little longer depending on the trades that you're taking and your setups. If you're using like half the size or like 5 MES or MNQ, whatever it may be. But again, the biggest thing is for longevity. You don't want to rush the process, as you always hear me say. So yeah, that's pretty much what I was doing. My goal now for my 100K account, I'm gonna get to when I get to 105K, then I'll probably add an additional YM contract on each trade that I take, just because I have a bigger buffer now between my losses. But yeah, all that making sense before I continue to the last portion of the class? Cool. So when it comes to risk reward and like win rate and stuff like that, I just want to touch on that just because, why not? So when it comes to risk reward, I used to say this, but I've changed my viewpoint on it as I've experimented since the beginning of this year. Because I always just say, each trade needs to have at least a 1 to 2 risk reward, or it's not worth to take. But in reality, if the win rate is there, then it doesn't matter. So hold on, let me bring this up real quick. Let's go to January. So January, I only took 1-to-1 risk reward trades. And I ended, so I took how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so 10, 14, 19, 22 trading days. I traded 22 days in January, only taking 1-to-1 risk reward trades. And I only lost, what was that? For 6 days. So I won out of the 22 trading days. Was that 6, 22? So 16 green days and 6 red days. And that's only taking one-to-one risk reward trades. And I still ended up green by a good amount. So as long as your win rate is there, you can definitely take a one-to-one trade. That's perfectly fine. It works. Your win rate just has to be up there. I think for the win rate for that month, it was like, with all the trades, I took like 75, 85% for the one-to-one risk reward. So as long as the win rate is there, a one-to-one risk reward is perfectly fine. Now, of course, you'll get other trades that'll be like 1-2 or even 1-3. It really varies, honestly. Let's say, for example, let's see. And Grim asked, and you never personally zero or hero contracts when it comes to options? Absolutely not. It's not in my risk tolerance to zero or hero. Not only that, but in my opinion, when you zero or hero contracts, for those who don't know what that means, zero or hero means you're either going to win the trade or you're going to lose all of it in that trade. So it's like a lotto trade. In my opinion, I don't do those trades. I used to a long time ago, but I don't anymore because it can build the bad habit where you can take it into your actual trades where you will be like, well, screw it. I'm either going to win this trade, or I'm going to lose it all. So in my opinion, I wouldn't zero or hero. It's just yes or no. And that's it. It's going to hit my take profit or it's going to hit my stop loss. But again, that's my personal opinion. That's what I do. If somebody else can zero hero without affecting the real trading and it works, hey, don't let me dissuade you. But that's not for me personally. So to give you guys an example, of a high risk reward trade, let's say the W trade model, right? This is not the cleanest W that I prefer, but I'll accept it for the case of the example. This happened on Friday in the afternoon. One thing to note for the W, if it's going to print, the algorithm is set to make it trigger between 12:50 and usually 1:30 p.m. Eastern, from what I've seen in my back testing. I first discovered it when it triggered around 1 o'clock. But you'll get some days where the algorithm triggers a W in the beginning of the day, like between 10 and 11:30 a.m. So keep that in mind. Anyway, actually, that's why you'll hear me say, like, I'll come back after I get off at 12 noon, like around 1 p.m. to see if this trade is setting up. If it's not, then I'll just turn everything off. Anyway, so we can see here, for those who know about the W trade model and how I take it, we're going to go long as soon as it reverses back up after the higher low, right here. Your stop loss could be under the right side of the W, or it can be under the bottom left. Me personally, I usually use 2 contracts on this trade, so I can trim at the first target and then trim at the second. If I were to use this low here as my stop loss, I'll only use 1 contract because 40 points or 41 points is too much for my personal risk tolerance for YM. So if you were to use my stop loss down here, I would use 1 contract. But up here at about 20-point loss, I would gladly use 2 contracts. That's only $200 loss. So in this trade, the first take profit level would be, and let's say, so here when the W completes, it'll be a risk reward of 1.75 for this specific version. There are other versions that'll be like 1-2 or 1-2.5, etc. So in this case, the first target, you would get in at what? That's 86, and that's 15 points. So in this case, I would make $75 profit on the first target, and I'll trim that there. And then my second target would be up here at about 35 points, which would be, was that 150, 175. So on that trade, I would have made 250 bucks hitting my target, or I would have lost 200 per trade, or 200 on that trade if it went against me. But of course, as we can see here, this thing just freaking kept on rocketing up. You can also, instead of taking your second target off there, you can just move your stop up under the candles. If you trade the strat, you will know what I mean. Where, let's say, let's get rid of this real quick. Let's say, for the sake of the conversation, this is the stop loss. Once it hits target 2, I'm like, all right, my stop loss, I'm going to keep it under that candle that it hit target 2. Then if it continues up, so if it does a 2-2 continuation, I'll move my stop loss under the trigger candle so I can see if I can squeeze more juice out of the trade. And then this candle went 2 up again. All right, cool. Let me move up my stop loss. And then this candle again, another 2 up. All right, cool. Let me move my stop loss up. And then again, this candle, another 2 up. So I can move my stop loss here. So then the next candle, when it would have came down, then I would have been stopped out here. So instead of getting 35 points, by moving my stop up as the candles continued going higher, I instead got 64 points, which would have brought the trade from 1.75, more or less, risk reward. It took us all the way up to about 3.32 or 3.37. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Cool. Anything else on risk management that I want to touch on? Uh, can you set a trail stop on futures? Absolutely, Ro. You can definitely do that. That's why I love Tradeovate. So hold on, let me log in here. So with your ATM setting, you can make it whatever you want. You can make it either like a trading, an auto trail, or an auto break even and auto trail. It really depends whatever you want. But I can easily set it to like a trail stop or auto trail, and then you can just configure what you want on it. I have it to auto break even when it hits a specific target, and then the trading stop kicks in automatically. So you can literally automate the entire trade if you wanted to, and just keep it simple. Excellent. All right, so that's pretty much all I have for today's class for the risk management and then the other little points that I mentioned. Nothing else is coming to mind that I want to go over. So I'll open it up to you guys. Any questions that you guys want to go over or any like other examples, let me know and we'll go over it. You can come off mute, you can talk on voice or just type it in the chat, whatever you prefer. The floor is open to everybody. No questions? Interesting. All right. I guess I did a good job then in explaining everything. Well, if there aren't any questions, I'll just do what I always do for every class. What was everyone's biggest takeaway, or what was the biggest thing that you took away from today's session that, resonated the most with you? Hey, thank you for that, Pat. I appreciate that. I do my best to, make this easy to follow and understand because, this can be very complicated. So I do what I can to, make it simple to get. Thank you for your words. I appreciate that. But yeah, what was everybody's biggest takeaway, or what was the biggest thing that stood out to you from today's class? Yep, definitely, Jonathan. Micros give you more opportunity to pass a challenge, and they give you more room. And same thing, there's no rush to, there's no need to rush the process because I find people, they're like, oh, I want to pass the account in a week so I can get paid out. But it's like that doesn't make sense because if you're not following your rules to pass the challenge in the first place, then you're gonna take those bad habits into the actual funded account. I'll give you an example or a story. I had this person that messaged me. Um, she traded NQ. Um, she traded NQ. I think she was like two contracts, and then she passed the account in like 2 days, like full size, like on some like gambling level. And she passed the prop account, and I'm like, and then when she told me that she passed it, that using that method, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna tell you right now, do not do that for the funded account because max leverage is not a strategy. So then she told me, she was like, oh, I have a trip in the month that I want to get paid out and I want to get a payout for it. But I told her, hey, I don't care. The market doesn't care about your trip. The market doesn't care about you. You need to follow your rules and your disciplines. Needless to say, she did not listen to me and she did the exact same thing she did with her evaluation stage and over leveraging. And that account got blown up in 2 days from her getting it. So not only did the prop firm get her evaluation money, which is probably like 30, $40, they also got the activation fee, which is like 140 to $200, depending on the accounts, or maybe more than that, depending on the accounts, account size you choose. So remember, you want the prop firms to pay you. You don't want to pay them. All that to say, take your time. The same rules that you're going to be using for the evaluation, you're going to be using the same thing for the funded accounts once you get them and pass the challenge. It doesn't matter if it's paper trading, doesn't matter if it's evaluation, doesn't matter if it's the funded account. You always follow your risk rules, always. Yeah, the thing with that, Grim, is like it. I remember somebody told me they're like, "Oh, I won this trade doing this," and I'm like, "Well, that's a poor trade because even though you made money on that trade, that's still a poor trade because you didn't follow the plan. Gambling, when you gamble and you win, that's horrible because you're training your brain. Oh, well, it's okay if I over leverage because I made money last time, but that's not sustainable in the slightest. You may get lucky and win two trades back to back. And then you'll be like, cool, I don't need rules. I'm making money. And then 2 days later, a week later, your account is at zero. I'm sure you guys hear it all the time. And I see a lot of stories online all the time. Hey guys, I had $1,000 account. I took it to $10,000 from 1,000, and I lost it all to zero. Not following the risk management rules. So, like I mentioned in the beginning of the class, your first priority is always being a risk manager. And the thing is, the way I like to look at it for myself is that I need to hold myself to a higher standard because it's just me trading. I don't work for a firm where I have the risk manager breathing down my neck, being like, hey, what are you doing? hey, I'm going to lock you out of the account. Hey, I'm going to fire you if you do this. We don't have that as retail traders. Um, we have to be all of those things for ourselves. Yeah, exactly, Pat. Remember, the prop firms, they're designed to, the prop firms are designed to entice you to make silly mistakes. Like Pat just mentioned for Apex, they're like, yeah, you can pass the account in 1 day. To me, that's just enticing you for bad behavior. So you definitely don't want to do that. Again, you want to take your time. I think my first prop firm took me like a month and a half to pass, something like that, because I was taking my time. Because the first account that I ever got, it was with I think Elite Trader Funding. They had what was called fast track. So the requirement to pass the account is a lot less than the regular accounts, but they only give you 2 weeks to pass it. So when I got that account, I was like, 2 weeks? That's easy. I can do this. And following my rules the way that I do, 2 weeks was not enough. Um, it didn't work out, and I failed that challenge because I ran out of time and I didn't hit the profit requirement. So again, you want to take your time when you're trading the evaluation accounts and the prop firms. And not only that, even when you get the actual funded account and you pass the evaluation, it still doesn't make sense to try to like get a lot of money, because they're gonna cap you anyway. Like for Apex, for the 100K account, I think I'm capped to like 2,500 or $3,000 for the first 3 months. So even if I make $10,000, it doesn't matter because I can't even take it out. So there's no point in me trying to make $1 billion every day. Remember, all of that money adds up. $200 a day, that's 1,000 a week. That's 4,000 a month. That's 48,000 a year. And I would gladly take $48,000 extra a year by pressing buttons. So you always want to look at the big picture. This is an overtime thing. You're not going to be a millionaire in a month. You're not going to be a millionaire in 2 months. You'll get there eventually. But again, take your time. That's another big thing, just being patient when it comes to your trades and stuff like that. Cool. All right. Any last questions that you guys want to ask, or any other big takeaways before we wrap up? Any specific book you've been reading? Go ahead. Whoever's speaking, you just have your email, so I'm not sure who you are.
Baby, also really bad right now. But, oh, eesh.
Well, are you talking to me or
No,
talking to somebody else?
this one bad. Screen.
All
What
right.
did I say yesterday?
You. Anyway, for whoever that is, your mic is hot, so I muted you. If you want to talk, just let me know. Any specific book you've been reading lately? Um, The Best Loser Wins by Tom Hogarth. I'm rereading that. I gave it to one of my students, and it was like mega eye opener for him. So definitely highly recommend Best Loser Wins by Tom Hogarth. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I always forget. Um, Great book. As a trader, like I always tell you guys, um, you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose trades. It's normal. Last week, how many trades? Hold on. Let's look at how many red days I've had so far this month. Uh, all right, I've traded 4 days this month. I had one red day in July. In June, I traded 15, 19 days, and I ended red 7 days. So I had 12 green days and 7 red days in June. So the book is great because, I won't go too deep into it, but essentially the concept is you need to be a good loser because what people fail to understand is that, like I mentioned, and I always keep on telling you guys until I imprint it in your brain, you're gonna lose trades. You're gonna end red. It's normal. It's to be expected. But losing triggers things in people's minds where they are like, oh, I need to end green because I can't be a loser. I'm a winner. Again, you don't want to bring your regular human life into trading because as Randy Howell says, one of my psychology trader mentors, he says you need to develop the trader's mind. The trader's mind is very different than the human mind because as a human being, we don't like losing. Let's say you work at a regular job. If you want to get a promotion, you want to win. You want to get that promotion. You're going to be upset if you don't. But as a trader, and as you develop the trader's mind, you can understand that, all right, losing is normal. Losing is to be expected. That way, when you take a loss, you don't bring your ego into the mix. You don't bring the human brain into the mix to try to like prove to the market that you're a winner or prove to somebody that you're a winner. That's why I mentioned to people, hey, whatever egos or whatever you're trying to prove to somebody or to people, whatever that may be, that has no place in trading. The market doesn't care if you want to prove to your friends that you can be a successful trader. It's not about that. If you're in this business to show off, then in my opinion, you're in the wrong business. I'll tell you that. Especially if it triggers things like that in you, where you're like, oh, I have to end green or else I'm a loser if I don't. It's like, no, you're not a loser. You just lost a trade. It is what it is. Take it gracefully and move on. And the problem with not being a good loser is that because you want to end green, you're going to take even more trades and you can potentially lose even more money. And again, I'm human. I get that same feeling where if I end red, I get the urge to place another trade to end green. But the biggest thing is learning to manage yourself when you get in that frame of mind or when your emotions come up. For me, I already know when that thought process comes up, when I hit a loss or when I hit my max loss for the day, I got to shut everything down and go for a walk and get some air and do my breathing practices. Because I know myself. If I stay on the charts, I'm going to take another trade for a fact. If I stay on the chart, I'm going to break my rules and I'm going to take another trade. But since I already know myself, I shut everything down and I leave. I close everything down so I can relax. Now, it doesn't happen all the time, but it still comes up. Like I said, I am human. There are days where I take my max loss, I don't feel anything. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I ended red for the day. Time to do my journaling, and then I'll come back tomorrow. Some days I get upset, but I just walk away, and then I come back when I'm level-headed, and then I shut everything down, do my journal, and then go about my business, doing other things throughout the day. So all that to say, his book is great. I'll post it in the Discord, in the general chat, if any of you want to get it. For those who are watching the replay on YouTube, I'll put it in the comment section below. Great book. Cool. All right. So that's pretty much all I have for today. I appreciate all of you guys and everybody for coming out and asking your questions and participating. I'm going to repost this probably in the next like 2-3 hours on YouTube. Actually, I'm going to set it to come out tomorrow, like at 5 p.m., just so it has time to process and stuff like that. But yeah, thank you guys again for coming out. Any questions that you guys have when you watch the replay, you know, put it in the comments below on YouTube, or if you're in my group, just message me in the Discord and I'll respond back to you. But yeah, again, appreciate you guys, and I will see you for the next one. I'm gonna have another class with another group in 15 minutes. It's gonna be similar to actually, let me stop recording for this because this is not relevant to YouTube.